So we're next going to talk about factor by grouping, and we use this with a polynomial that has 4 or more terms. And the first step, and this is a step that you're always going to be doing with factoring, is identify and factor out the GCF from all 4 terms. And go ahead and add a period there. Once you've done that, you want to factor out the GCF from the first pair of terms and the GCF from the second pair of terms. And just to note, you may have to rearrange the terms first before you group. And the idea is when you do that, we're hoping that you end up something like this problem here. By factoring out the greatest common factor for the first 2 terms and the greatest common factor for the last 2 terms, hopefully then you'll have a binomial that are in common. You can factor out to finish the process. So if the 2 terms share a common binomial factor, factor out the binomial factor. So here's an example they did. So they first checked the GCF here of each term is 1. So they grouped the first 2 terms together. And now notice how they grouped the last term. So they put a plus sign and they kept that negative with the 10. We factor out the greatest common factor of 6a from the first 2 terms. And we factor out a 5. Now since this term here is negative, like we were doing in the last part here, we want to factor out a negative 5. That way my 2 binomials match. It has to be an exact match. I factor that out and then I bring over my leftovers. So if I look at number 8, GCF of all these first terms is just 1. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms together. And I'm going to group the last 2 terms together. So now I'm going to look at the first 2 terms. And I can see I can do a 5 here and also an x. So my greatest common factor here is going to be a 5x. My leftovers, well, 20 divided by 5 is 4. X squared divided by x is x. 25 divided by 5 is 5. X's divide out, we get 5y. Now when I do the second part, hopefully after I factor out the greatest common factor, then I should have a 4x here, over here. So I can kind of cheat here a little bit. If I look at 24xy divided by 4x, that would be 6y. And sure enough, 6y would be my greatest common factor. (24) divided by 6 is 4. The y's divide out, bring down the x. 30 divided by 6 is 5, so that's a negative 5. And then y squared divided by y is y. So now I see that I have the 4x minus 5y in common. I'm going to bring that out in front. My leftovers are this 5x plus 6y. And so that would be my answer. Let's try the next example. And looking at this, again, my greatest common factor here just going to be 1. So I'm going to go into my grouping. I'm going to group the x cubed and the minus 5x squared together, and then the 4x minus 20 together. So if I look at the first 2 terms, their greatest common factor is x squared. That gives me an x minus 5 as my leftovers. Last 2 terms would be have a common factor of 4, so I want to pull that out. And let me get my other color going here. That would be an x minus 5. And now my two pieces have an x minus 5 in common, so I'm going to put that on front. That gives me an x squared plus 4. Let's try the next one. So with this one, again, I'm checking each term here. Greatest common factor is 1, all right, so don't have to worry about that. I'm going to group the first two together and the last two together. I'm going to be a little careful here because I have a subtraction here. So the way I'm going to group this, I'm going to put a plus here, and I'm going to keep the negative with the 5x. GCF here is x squared for the first two terms. That gives me an x plus a is my leftovers. Here 5 is my greatest common factor, but again, I'm going to use that rule that if first term I'm factoring out is negative, I'm going to factor out a negative greatest common factor. And then our two pieces have this x plus 8 in common, so we're going to bring that on front. My leftovers here are x squared minus 5. Ooh, this one gets a little bit nasty here. So again, first thing I check, greatest common factor here, each is going to be 1, so I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to group the first two terms together. Again, I'm going to be very careful on how I group the last two terms. I'm going to put a plus sign, and I'm going to keep that negative with that 16x cubed. Greatest common factor here would be a 5x cubed. (20 divided by 5 is 4. 6 minus 3 is 3. And then negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. And the x's divide out. Over here I got common factor 4. Again, that's negative, so I'm going to take out a negative 4. And let's get our leftovers. Hopefully they're the same. 4x cubed minus 3. And then I'm looking at my 4x cubed minus 3. That's what's in common in both parts. So I'm going to put that out in front. And my leftovers would be the 5x cubed minus 4. And so that would be my answer. Let's try one more of these. So again, before I do anything, I got to check, see if I got a greatest common factor. And if I look, I got 10, 80, 20, and 40. That has a common factor of 10. And then I also notice that each term here has a y. So I want to factor out a 10y. So that becomes x cubed minus 8 minus 2x squared plus 4x. Guess I didn't need that all the way along here. Now, notice earlier they mentioned that when you start doing factor by grouping, sometimes you might need to rearrange the terms here first. So if I try to do my factor by grouping here with an x cubed minus 8, I'm not going to be able to pull anything out in common except for 1. and that's not going to work with this. But I kind of notice here that it seems like the powers are just kind of out of sync. So at the very least, I want to maybe rewrite this in order of descending powers. So let's do that. Let's rearrange the terms. I'm going to put the x cubed followed by the negative 2x squared plus the 4x minus 8. Just rearranging the terms. And now let's try the factor by grouping. Keep in mind, this 10y here is still out in front. We're not doing anything with it. We're just bringing it down. But now I'm going to do the grouping here. I'm going to look at these first two terms. They have a common factor of x squared. So I'm going to pull that out. My leftovers are x minus 2. And now I'm going to look at the last two terms. Those have a common factor of 4. My leftovers are going to be x minus 2. And now looking at my two pieces, they have a common factor of x minus 2. So I want to put that towards the front. Now I'm going to keep the 10y in the very front. Next to that, I'm going to put in that binomial x minus 2. And then finally, x squared plus 4. It's important you don't forget about that 10y that we factored out at the beginning. If you just put that in as your answer in ALEKS, it's going to count it wrong. This is your answer here.